Welcome into Rounding the Bases, the podcast about culture and leadership with a baseball twist, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. Hashtag no stopping you. Enterprise Bank and Trust was founded by entrepreneurs with the core focus of serving privately owned small and medium-sized businesses who have a story to tell. Enterprise Bank's commitment is to listen, learn, and guide clients to a lifetime of financial success. Enterprise Bank, together there's no stopping you. My name is Joel Goldberg. And thanks for joining the podcast, coming to you from the Kansas City Audiovisual Studios. They create engaging spaces. You can check them out at kcav.com. A real exciting show today with a man that is helping change the city and the neighborhoods that he grew up in. There's so much to discuss in terms of leadership, in terms of development, in terms of where we're at, in terms of race and equality here in this country and in Kansas City. The president and CEO at Community Builders of Kansas City is Emmet Pierson Jr., and he joins me right now. And Emmet, it's great to see you. I know that we've had some good talks already. How are you?
I am doing fantastic, Joel, and thank you so much for having me this morning. I am so excited to be with you, the legend himself.
Oh, stop. Listen, you are the one that is making an impact in the city. I'm just the one that gets to share the story. And I love your story because, look, there's so many people that want to make the world a better place, to make their communities a better place. And you're doing that, but you're also doing it in a place where you've seen all sides of things. You've grown up, you experienced all this. So before we talk about Community Builders, let's talk about your background and maybe why, among all the hard work you put into your life, you're the right guy to be making this impact in the community. Tell me about your background growing up.
So I have the pleasure of leading an organization that's literally 5 minutes away from where I grew up. I grew up in what the Kansas City Star called many, many years ago, one of the worst zip codes in Kansas City and further the state of Missouri. Single parent mom. My father passed when I was 4 years old. We took public transportation. My mom is 86, and she still takes the public transportation and walks 2.5 miles every day, still working. And she was a former teacher as well as a neighborhood leader. And so from that, I was able to have a couple of breaks come my way and had the good fortune of going to some outstanding schools, visitation, grade school, Rockhurst High School, and ultimately University of Kansas, all from, the urban community. And so I get to come back every day with a terrific team of talented individuals, and we try to make a difference. We try to change the landscape throughout Kansas City.
Well, it's a remarkable story, and it's one that, like I mentioned, I love the fact that you are the guy, and it's not just you. I mean, I know you've got a great team of people, but you're leading a group that is literally, and I don't like to use that word too much because all the kids use it over and over again, but you're literally changing the neighborhoods that you grew up in. So let's start with this in terms of the present day. Tell me more about Community Builders.
Community Builders of Kansas City will be celebrating our 30th anniversary next year. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit community development corporation, and we started out of, at that time, it was called Swope Parkway Health Center. Now it's Swope Health Services. And so, for 30 years, as a result of them really giving us our start to address issues that were affecting the immediate community, primarily they wanted to build a drug treatment facility behind our headquarters here on Blue Parkway. And of course, two neighborhoods came together and said, "Are y'all nuts?" And so, we were formed to really go out and organize the community, hear what they were saying, listen to their words. And after some robust conversations, Joel, they came and they said, "Okay, if we agree to do this, and it's a big if, we're going to want you all to do these things." And those things were, we want a grocery store. We want a daycare center. We want quality, affordable housing. We want you to get rid of the flooding that occurs here, because where we sit used to be 25 feet underwater in 1993 every time it rained pretty hard. We want access to jobs. We want those things that other communities have every day and take for granted. And if you put a plan together to do that, we then will support this endeavor. And Joel, we took that to heart. And so for the last 25 plus years, we have been implementing that plan. And now we are beginning to move further west back toward Troost Avenue, because where we are not only east of Troost, we're east of Prospect, we're east of Cleveland is our base of operations. So we really work in areas that no one else likes to work in or say they can't work in. So we run the gamut of development activities from single family housing, Class A office space, grocery anchored retail center, 700 units of affordable housing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it was called the Mount Cleveland Initiative. And so that's been our guiding principle on how we've been working with helping the communities that many folks say are, not one pulling their weight. If you listen to, various other areas that are underserved, and that's an understatement, are food deserts. And so that's what we do in a nutshell.
I think to me, it's interesting too, because when I look at the website, when I look at some of the descriptions, the mission and all of that, and you guys are developers. When I think of a developer, I think of putting up big buildings and all of that. But then at the same time, you're talking about strengthening families. And I'm not trying to diminish what others do, but everybody likes to talk about family values and all of that. But you guys are actually developing and bringing families together and making lives better. I think that can sound simple and easy. It's something that everybody says they want to do. But this isn't just a group coming in there and putting up buildings. I mean, there's a lot of strategy to this beyond just making money. I want you to expand on that, because I think that you guys have the chance here to change generations.
Let me, be very honest with you and transparent. Joel, I love building buildings. We are a development company. The difference is, we like making money. The difference is that the money that we make, and it's minuscule every now and then, is we put that right back into our mission. We put that back into the communities that we serve. And so, yes, we are a development company, but we are a development company that listens to the community. There's no project that we've done that the community has not either reached out to us or we've had extensive community engagement as part of the process. It's ingrained in us. And so, but it's not enough to just build buildings. We have to build healthy communities. As we're going through this whole election stuff right now, we have a country divided. We really do. And it's a country, in my view, that is a country of, me as opposed to we. We're divided culturally, we're divided racially, we're divided socioeconomically. And, we're going through this pandemic now. So, we can get into the whole conversation of, is there unequal health care? Absolutely. But it comes down to community builders. We are about building a community of we. It's not about brick and mortar. It's about, we provide economic opportunity. We provide access to resources that folk normally would not have. In our building, we have a building of not-for-profits that are doing outstanding work. Catholic Charities of Kansas City, Legal Aid of Western Missouri, Boys and Girls Club. That's intentional, because along with us, we have to have partners to provide access to opportunities for those folk who may be hurting or just may need an opportunity like I had to make their own difference in the world. So, I'll get off my soapbox, Joel, but it's not just about the brick and mortar. We love doing that, but it's more about how do we take our little bit and how do we begin to make a difference in the lives of those residents who oftentimes are forgotten.
And I think that you're so perfectly positioned for this. And put aside all of the school and the hard work and the sacrifice and climbing the ranks like all of us that hopefully are successful do. You certainly have paid your dues. But, and I touched on this at the start of the podcast, to me, you're so well positioned in this world of divisiveness, which oftentimes comes down to the color of your skin. It shouldn't. It's amazing that is still happening. You are a guy that in many ways grew up in two neighborhoods, because you grew up in the neighborhood you're talking about right now, the one that was discounted by so many and still is discounted by so many. And then you'd hop on a bus and go to the proverbial other side of the tracks for school, which I know in many ways helped prepare you for where you're at today in terms of education, and also seeing another side of the world. And I don't know if it's a better side or worse side, a different side. Let's put it that way. So, how did that shape you, being a guy that was growing up in one neighborhood and going to school in another?
It really opened my eyes because, in my household, and again, I talked about my single parent mom, and, my grandmother helped raise me as well. So I thought I had everything I needed. No, I wasn't homeless, but I can tell you, Joel, I know the yellow slip looks like in the now effigy, used to be Casey Pinnell bill. I know what that looks like. I know what the blue slip in the water bill looks like. I knew what that was at an early age, but I never thought that I didn't have everything I needed. And then I went, 3 buses. It wasn't just one, Joe. It was 3 buses from 52nd in Brooklyn to 51st in Maine. And, I got to rub elbows and became very good friends with some of Kansas City's elite families. And then that continued when I went to Rockhurst High School. So I would, spend 10, 11 hours, west of Prospect, west of Troost, right off the plaza, Sunnyside Hill area, Luce Park, all of those great areas. And I got to see how those families lived, and, the big houses, and, they made me feel welcome. And then I would come home and I would see the direct opposite. I would see, how the infrastructure wasn't quite as well, how the sidewalks were crumbled, or if there were sidewalks at all. I got to see how when there was an issue, someone would pick up the phone and there'd be a response there. I got to see, two of my best friends their dads were bankers at, two of the elite stalwart family-owned banks here. And I got to see a little bit of how banking worked. And so that really shaped me. So I really had a foot in two worlds. In my home life, with all the guys that I would go play basketball with. And then I saw the elite upper crust life and what that looked like. And so, over the years, how can I use those experiences to turn around and parlay those experiences into making change in the community that I choose to come back to, that I choose to be a part of every day? And again, I've been able to attract folk who really believe in the mission and the work that we do. And we have a chip on our shoulder. We take on those projects that folks say can't be done, shouldn't be done, that the community says, hey, we got to have, an example of that is we purchased a grocery store June the 30th, the Blue Parkway Sunfresh. Why did we do it? We're not in the grocery business. We build stuff. We help build communities. But what is essential to every community? Healthy food. And so even with the grocery store, we're still in a food desert. And so we also wanted to save what amounts to 68 jobs, who 85% of those people are from this immediate community. That's why we own a grocery store now. We helped build it some 15 years ago, and now we own it. And we have the, good fortune of having an African-American store manager, which is rare, from the community. Again, that community theme continues. And we are beginning to refresh our Blue Parkway Sunfresh. And so it's exciting. It's terrifying because that's, we typically don't get in businesses that we don't fully understand. We understand that the return on investment may not be what a typical investor may see, but we have a social responsibility to make sure that this community has access to healthy foods.
It's interesting, for people that don't live in the communities you're talking about or don't go down to them. And look, a lot of people, and this isn't just a white or black thing, you stick to where you're comfortable with and you never really venture out. You had I'd call it a blessing of being able to live in both worlds, which to me, as you were talking about this, it very much made me. I mean, I grew up suburbs in Philadelphia and then Chicago, and certainly was sheltered, but it was my TV jobs that enabled me to start going into every kind of neighborhood, because the basketball games and the football games were being played in the inner city. They're being played in the suburbs. The kids and their families that I needed to interview might have been in the richest suburbs of St. Louis, or they might have been in East St. Louis. And what I came to find, and why I personally feel comfortable walking into any neighborhood, any restaurant, any group, is people are people, and you need to understand them better. I think you obviously, like, look, I'm sure, Emmett, that when you came back home from school, you had some kids that you hung out with in the neighborhood that are like, oh, what are all those guys like? And then when you're sitting there hanging out with your buddies at Rockhurst, they're saying, oh, what are those guys like? And you were, I'm guessing here, and you fill in the blanks, you were kind of the guy in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, it was a unique experience. And I would say, so it was about 7 of us, African Americans, that went to Rockhurst. I was the only one at visitation. Let me say that. So I was the only one at visitation. And then there were about 7 of us that would catch the public bus together. Same kind of situation, lived right off Prospect or Paseo, caught the bus, rode to Rockhurst. We had friends in Mission Hills and Leawood, Western Johnson County wasn't as built up as it is now. It was a bunch of sticks. But we were hanging out in Leawood, Mission Hills, and, it was a unique experience because I would come back and be on the basketball court right across from my house. And, they'd say, what are those rich white folk like? And I would say, hey, they got money, but they breathe air just like us. They have the same challenges just like us. They have a little bit more resources to be able to deal with those challenges than us. But I'm like, they have their own issues and successes, much like we do. I can tell you that they don't have the perception that we have to deal with and still deal with, that the perception of, crime and, everything is bad. And that wasn't, my experience. And here, on the CBKC / Swope Health campuses, that's not our experiences either. But I mean, those were the challenges that, I had to navigate. Was it always rosy, as I'm saying now? Absolutely not. We had some big disagreements with some of my visitation in Rockhurst. It's so funny because a 30-second story. So when we had all the racial unrest regarding Mr. Floyd's killing, I got a email from an old classmate in my grade school that had recalled calling me the N-word. I honestly didn't remember that, to be perfectly honest with you. And he called to say that he was so very sorry and that he didn't fully understand the power of that word. And he said he saw my face that it went from fun and games to very seriousness. And he called to tell me sorry. And I can't tell you how moving that was for me because I honestly hadn't remembered it. But he said it had made an impact on him. And as he was sitting there with his family, he really understood after seeing George Floyd get choked out in front of all of America. He understood at that moment what it was somewhat like to be me, as I was so oftentimes the only one in the room or in the school. And so that kind of just gives you a sense of, some of the issues that were always present. But again, my time at Rockhurst, loved it, would not have traded it. We had some challenges there, but I am still very close to many of those guys, non-African Americans, to this day. And it's wild to see our kids now growing up. I have 2 lovely girls. They went to St. Teresa's, and the Rockhurst St. Teresa's connection, it's a real thing. I married a St. Teresa's girl. So for those inside baseball, no pun intended, of the Rockhurst St. Teresa's, that is a real thing. Yes.
I have so many things I want to ask following up on that because it's a very powerful story that I think everyone in some form or another can relate to. First, there's the element of being in grade school, the only white kid in the room, and the burden that potentially was, or maybe not, maybe you just didn't, this is just the way it was, That's the first thing, and then I have a follow up too. But what was that like? Because what I've come to learn is that look, there's privilege in walking into a room and everybody else looking like you. You don't have to worry about anything. But here you are at a young age, like so many African American kids that maybe end up at a different school or in any setting, a baseball field, whatever it is. And you look around and everyone is different. How much of a burden, if at all, was that as a kid?
I'm gonna be honest with you. My grandmother and my mother did a fantastic job of preparing me because, as I kind of talked about earlier, I didn't think I ever needed anything because I thought I had just enough. So that flows into my grandmother, particularly, had, a sixth grade education, but she was the smartest woman I know. And she instilled in me that I was the baddest dude walking on the earth. I was a skinny kid with a mini fro, but she instilled in me that nobody's better than you. And that wasn't in a arrogant way. It was just a reaffirming way that you are that dude. You know, she didn't know what swag was back then, but she instilled in me a lot of swag. And so, yes, it was different. I knew that I was the only one, but I had the confidence. I'm not saying that confidence wasn't at times shaken, you know, but I had the confidence to walk into a room because, my mom and my grandma said, you walk into a room, your head held high, you look people in the eye, give a firm handshake, and you make sure that they know you're there. And so, I don't know if I always protruded that, to where, other people felt like I felt inside. So, that was not intimidating to me. And it still isn't because I'm now so used to being oftentimes the only one in the room, the only one on a Zoom call, one of a very few African American led organizations doing their thing. Um, you know, uh, so that helped me. At Rockhurst, I was a little bit different animal because everybody there thought they were the dude, you know, either academically, athletically, or both. So you had a bunch of dudes thinking they're the dude with a lot of swag. So sometimes that came into a little bit of, controversy. But, the staff there was fantastic in making sure that we, were men for others. And that was the motto at Rockhurst, men for others. And so, again, I'm not going to tell you that sometimes it wasn't intimidating. It was intimidating more, Joel, to be honest with you, when I went in some of my friends' houses off of 59th and Ward Parkway or in Mission Hills. And, they have 4-car garage and, the heated floors back then and, all of this great stuff. And, I had my 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house, which, as a funny story, some of my best friends in grade school took the bus home with me and spent the night on several occasions. And I ran into one of them who I see every now and then because he has a daughter at St. Teresa's. And he still talks about taking the bus home with my mom and her making the best hamburger to this date that he's ever had. I just ran into him about 3 weeks ago and he asked about my mom. So, I mean, those are the kind of things that I cherish and I build on. So when I'm talking to banks who don't want to fund projects in this community because they don't think that it's enough of an ROI, and when I'm having to deal with the challenges of cost versus value, cost versus appraised value, because that all affects what I do and how I do it, how our cost of money, I know how to be calm. I know how to sit there and say, okay, so I hear what you're saying, because I've been in difficult situations. And so I learned from that. And it has truly shaped what I do, how I do it, and a lot of my thinking.
First off, on the standpoint of the friends coming over and sleeping over and the hamburgers and all that, once you break down doors
Slept on the floor. As I'll
and
say,
slept
slept
on
on
the
the
floor,
floor.
but guess what? People don't care. Like, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a good way. And not even just kids. Like, I think that we sometimes worry about, like, we all have people that have bigger homes than us and flashier cars or whatever it is. And we know people that have less. And you know what? When you go to someone's house that doesn't have as much, you don't sit there and say, "Oh, look at how small this is." And people, you know, I don't go to someone else's house that's bigger and judge it. We get it in our heads sometimes, and I'm guessing those kids came over, and back to what I said before, people are people. They love the hospitality, they love the food, they loved hanging out. They didn't care that they were sleeping on the floor. It was a fun night. But the one follow up I had, and then I'll move on, was I think the story that you told about the guy calling you to apologize for having used the N word. I'm guessing probably back in the '80s, or
Yes, it was from 1977 to like 80.
yeah. So I mean, we're talking
76, excuse me.
we're talking about a lot of years ago. I mean, but what struck me as being powerful was that you didn't remember it, and so to me that means either it happened many other times, so this wasn't just one moment that would stand out, or it just didn't, whatever it is. But the flip side is he did that, stuck with him forever, like in some form or another that was in his brain. And so I don't really know what to make of that, other than the fact that it's a powerful moment that, you know, 40 years later, 40 plus years later, that was coming back after the murder of George Floyd.
You know, like I said, it was 76 to, I was at visitation from 76 to 80, 74 to 80, somewhere in there. In the third grade, I was there from the third grade to the eighth grade. And what I make of it is one, it happened a fair amount. I mean, not necessarily at grade school, but when we would go play other schools, you know, you get that, you know, kids are talking trash and it gets a little heated, and you know how that leads. But what it also showed me is that there is hope for this country and our society, that we can recognize something that may have been wrong or hurtful, to hopefully learn from that, and then to use that to recognize, hey, I need to say I'm sorry, or I need to understand that that wasn't okay. And then to accept that we all make mistakes. You know, we all have our, you know, preconceived notions of how things should be, and that's part of us. But how do we grow from that? How do we begin to influence others? So for me, that was a powerful moment, because honestly, I didn't remember that particular person saying that. You know, but you know, once he gave the specific details of it, I'm like, I kind of vaguely remember this on the playground happening. But you know, yeah, I mean, so that's all I make of it as well, is that this country still has room to learn from its issues.
A lot of room to grow, no doubt about it. Before I get to my baseball theme questions, I had a question to ask that came in from Kiana Sinks, and she's become one of my good friends, like my little sister now. And she's working, among other projects, she's working at the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, and she's so active and so inspiring. And she's going to be a superstar if she's not already. And her question was, Mr. Pierson, I love the respect there, by the way, Mr. Pierson, how important is it that we persevere within our Black historical community at 18th and Vine? How do we continue to educate the younger demographic of Kansas City?
Great question. So I would say we have to keep persevering with 18th and Vine is a must. Why? Because of the rich cultural heritage, not only around 18th and Vine, but I can even go into Parade Park and it being, you know, the first Black African-American co-op. You know, we can go on to the Attic School and its rich history there. We can go on to talk about the Kansas City Call and its rich history, and how that needs to be supported. You know, I think it's extremely important that the next generation knows the tremendous history contributions that have been made for this city. So oftentimes we don't celebrate that in the African American community, and we don't celebrate it on the east side of Kansas City. You know, and so, you know, I am not bashful in saying the east side of Kansas City. You know, it can be the east side, the underserved. We all know what that means. And so I think we need to not only celebrate it, persevere, but we need to find a way to grow and have other businesses, create other housing opportunities. And we need to make sure that we I tell my kids about it. One, my wife's family grew up in Parade Park, so it's kind of ingrained. We go to church at St. Monica's at 17th and Paseo. And so I think it needs to start with us reaching back to our KCMO school districts and the job that Dr. Bedell is beginning to turn that thing around. I think it needs to be listening sessions. I think it needs to be inviting business leaders to come and be a part of 18th and Vine, whether it's, the Urban Youth Academy, whether it's having them host some of their business meetings there of some of their employees, younger employees. I think it's a whole host of things, and I don't want to, go off on my tangent on that, but I think 18th and Vine is so integral into the success of our urban city. But I will say this, it also can't be the only focus of our city on the east side.
Okay, I want to get to my baseball themed questions now, brought to you by Kissick Construction, trusted team, reliable partner. Check them out at kissickco.com. Let's begin with the home run question. What is, professionally speaking, Emmett, the biggest home run that you've hit?
Honestly, it's being right where I am right now. Very candidly, since it's just us talking, I left here the first time. This is my second time with the organization. I left here in disappointment that I did not get the top job here some 12, 13 years ago. And I left here kind of dejected, kind of questioning my talents. And so for the board of directors here, community builders, to reach out to me and some of my old colleagues to reach out to me and say, hey, can you come back and help us? And that was turned into me taking over the organization and the staff, the community, and the board giving me the latitude to take us in an accelerated direction. That's probably my biggest home run. The second one, and I got to put it in there because it's important, is marrying my wife. She really has, she was the one that gave the final push for me to come back here. And she's like, get over your pride, suck it up, take your talents. You love being there, so get to doing what you do. So, she's the smartest person I know. So that, so that's kind of the just as important home run.
Well, of course. Not only do you have to do that, well, you don't have to do that, but let's give credit where credit is due, and especially if she's watching, but
she's seeing patients right now. She's a local pediatrician.
I know she's a doctor. She's got many more important things to do than to be watching us two guys sitting here.
Right.
She can watch later if she wants. But just to follow up on the home run too, because it reminds me a little bit. My good friend Bob Kendrick at the Negro Leagues Museum, he had to put his pride on the side, and he really kind of channeled his inner Buck O'Neill to say, look, they didn't want me the first time, and now they're asking me to come back. And that museum and everything, a lot of what's going on in that neighborhood is a result of him putting that pride aside. So for you to put your pride aside and to see the potential end result, how important was that?
It was huge. It was a pride thing. I thought I should have gotten it, and I had to get over it, grow from it and learn from it. And how do you bring that experience back to help move not only an organization, but larger? How do we begin to move a community? And without any arrogance, I thought I was the best person to do that. I told my wife and close friends there was only 2 jobs that I would come back for, because I was running a pretty decent consulting business in urban economic development. But this was one of them. I won't tell you what the other one is.
Fair enough. Let's get to the swing and miss. What's the biggest swing and miss you've taken, and what have you learned from it?
Again, so much revolves around this organization. The swing and misses, I put I was at the plate, and I had positioned myself to take on community builders, and I missed it, and so, I struck out, and I had to learn from that again. So, this organization means so much in the growth and development of my elder professional career. Yeah, again, I was having fun doing my own consulting thing, but I needed to be a part of a bigger team. Some of us can be a lone wolf. I like to be with other people to bounce ideas off of, to look at, how do we attack new challenges. And so the timing was right. So, I mean, that was probably my biggest swing and miss, that I had to really, go back to spring training, if you will, get back in the batting cage, learn how to hit the curveball, because that was a big curve for me, and, move on from that.
And if you learn from it, it ends up being a victory. And then that's obviously what has happened. Last baseball themed question, small ball. What are the little things that add up to the big things for you?
For me, I'll say the little things is begin to, and they all add together, begin to hone in on being able to listen not only on the broader issues affecting the community, but what's that one issue that could be a catalyst. So it's a small thing, but listening for that, I won't say game changer, listening for that bunt to move the base runner over to second base. So I'd say that. I would say, really having a better understanding and relying on other teammates. And that's hard for me because, hey, again, my grandmother and that swag, I got a lot of that to get out the way. Let me do it myself. And so learning how to deal with and let others lead. And sometimes I may need to follow their lead. And that was hard. So again, being, so that's also that bunt to that single, and then to the double, if you will, and small ball and small steps is really beginning and learning how to begin to pull in resources, the smaller resources, the $100,000 grant. My organization, we have some, $50 million in net assets, no cash. And we've never had any single individual donor give to community builders. And so I'm now beginning to say, how do I begin to coddle together smaller donors to begin to bring in equity partners, because we've always had ourselves as our own equity partners, and beginning to, humble myself and humble the organization to say, we need help. Now, again, I'm not going to say I need so much help that we got to lose our swag, but, we want to be able to have resources to do other things. And if we're using our own resources to do that, then we can't take on those other projects. So, I mean, it's a little bit different answer, but those smaller things begin to add up to where, we are fast becoming and even more of a juggernaut on the east side. We say we're the largest developers on the east side, but more of a role in policy in dealing with the conversation around affordable housing. And the next crisis that's right around the corner is evictions. How do we play in that game? And so those are the small ball steps of going back to our initial theme of creating a holistic, healthy community. We got a long way to go, but I think we put in some places and some strategies and some signs as we're on the basis that we can begin to look at to move forward.
Love all the baseball references there. And it's a reminder really to what we said beginning this podcast too, that yes, you're a developer, but this is so much more about community and investing in them. Okay, 4 final questions as we round the bases. And by the way, your grandmother might not have known the word swag, but she certainly knew about the meaning of swag. Clearly, it just had a different expression back then. But my first question as we round the bases will be about your mom. I know she's in her 80s now. It sounds to me like she is, in the best of ways, a driven, maybe stubborn, this is the way that I do things. I might be wrong, and you can certainly correct me, but I want to know about the woman that still is taking the bus and still is saying, I don't need the car and all of that, because there's something beautiful about, from what I can hear and read here, in a woman that hasn't changed who she is.
Yeah. So my mom is 86 years old, Opal Marie Pierson. She still takes the bus. She still works. I don't know why, but I asked her, I said, Mother, what else am I going to do? So, she's still that person, very opinionated. I took her to the store because she still goes to the grocery store that the organization built and now we own. And I remember taking her through the first time, and she was impressed. And now she's that same person. Well, the pricing here too high. We need to deal with the prices. If you own it, make the prices lower. So, I mean, we still have our spats, but that's just how we are. I think, she's so independent. She raised me to be independent. So she's doing fine, knock on wood. She is still the guiding light on how I do everything. I still bring her to projects that I do so she can critique them, and she's never short of critique. But I know that she's also proud of me as well. So she's doing good. Thank you for asking.
Let's flip it then to the next generation, and you and your wife have raised two daughters, and I know one playing soccer at Howard, the other one is at Kentucky. What have you told them? I mean, your mom and your grandmother gave you all of this advice, and the world has changed since you were growing up. Yet at times it feels like it's still the same, and they found themselves in the St. Teresa's environment, and so certainly they had exposure to some of what you had. And I'm just wondering what your perspective was and where they're at this point.
So, as you said, I have two lovely daughters, 21 and 19. Our oldest plays soccer for Howard University Bisons, HU. For those who went to HBCUs, they know what that is. And so that was a blessing to us. And she's doing very well. She's a little bit bummed on this pandemic and the season. So that's a challenge. And then our young daughter, full of energy, full of life. She is truly the extrovert. She's at the University of Kentucky, and she's getting back into her pageants. She's, former national beauty queen at a young age. Both of them are outstanding athletes and outstanding students. But, we instilled upon them that because we have been blessed, that doesn't mean that you all get to sit back and live off of us. So it was important at very young ages. Joel, they took the bus with my mother as well all over Kansas City so they could understand that challenge as well. We have instilled in them a strong giving back volunteer. I can tell you my oldest one, as now that she's home doing school through Zoom, she comes here and volunteers. And so she understands what we're doing here. Our youngest, we've instilled in them again this political season. This was her first presidential election and first time to vote. We thought it was important enough that we flew her back here to vote at our polling location. So they both are very civic minded. I would tell you our oldest one, they both went to St. Teresa's Academy, so go Stars. I can tell you that being in DC has made my oldest daughter so much in tune politically of what's going on. Before, they didn't care about what was going on politically other than who's running. But I mean, both of them are discussing. I know our youngest did a podcast about the election and issues around the election over the last month with my, I have a sister from my dad's first marriage. So we hope that we've instilled in them, you don't get to use privilege. No, you need to, one, pave your own way, but you need to understand the significance of being African-American future leaders and what that looks like. So it's not enough for you to be average. No, you can't be marginal. So we've challenged them. Part of the reason that we engaged them to go outside of Kansas City is Kansas City's too comfortable. With myself, my wife, we've been able to establish some relationships here. No, go away, figure out your own stuff, figure out your own relationships, figure out your life, and figure out the struggle without mom and dad being there. Now, if you listen to my wife, she'll tell you that I still spoil them, but I'm sorry.
That's a discussion about dads and daughters. Third question, as we round the bases, you talked about the grocery store, food desert, still so much work to do. But I'm just curious what that response has been, what you've heard in the community to suddenly have something that is something that people can be proud of, something that potentially presents opportunity, whether it be in jobs, healthier food, access that so many of us take for granted. What have you heard from people?
Joe, you're right. So many of us take for granted the ability to go to not only one grocery store, but heck, if you're in other communities, you may have 3 grocery stores in a 3-mile radius, and that's not even including Super Target and Walmart. So that's a big deal. One, because it's such a need. And as I said, even with the grocery store, we're still in a food desert. And so to have it be acquired by Community Builders of Kansas City, to be able to have an African-American store director. And what we're really happy about is that we also have as our assistant store director, someone that's from a family that was the oldest African-American grocer in all the country, the Stapleton family. So we have a young lady by the name of Michelle Mitchell, who is bringing that legacy of African-American grocers to our store. And I can't tell you, we talked about 18th and Vine and that legacy. This is the same smaller legacy, but just as important. So, and again, we love the fact that, we can provide jobs. We understand that the store is a challenge because we have to bring it up to date. We have to bring prices back in line. We understand all that, but we have some great folks there. And I'm just going to ask you to just be a little bit patient with us, but you will begin to see changes as you already have. So, that's probably one of the biggest accomplishments that I think our team is very proud of.
All right, last question. The walk-off Community Builders of Kansas City. I think you told me around $80 million in assets. Long term, what are the hopes? Say 10 years, 20 years down the road, as the next generation starts to come, and now you end up being the third generation. You end up moving into those grandfather years. You and I both. What do you? I know it's painful to hear and think about, but what do you envision for the East Side?
What I envision for the East Side is I'm hoping that we can get some continued growth. We still have a lot of challenges on the East Side. There still needs to be some economic opportunities. This city is known for entrepreneurship. We need to see more of that on the East Side. Entrepreneurship is going to drive and create new jobs, particularly in the tech industry. There's still a huge digital divide here. So I'm hoping that the digital divide will be closed. We could have not only one grocery store every 5 miles, but maybe several. There'll be mixed income housing and not just housing that's affordable, because that's very important. But we need to be able to have housing for all folk, I hope that we continue here at Community Builders of building a diverse staff. We have a diverse staff from youth to old guys like myself, and I have a couple that's even older than me. Socioeconomics, different in religions, different of politics. That creates rich discussion, and rich discussion leads to creative energy to solve challenges and problems. I hope there's more than just one community builder. I hope there are several other nonprofits making tremendous impacts on the various neighborhoods that we serve. We have a few now. With Westside Housing on the West Side doing their thing, Urban Neighborhood Initiative with Diane Cleaver doing her thing. We have 12th Street Heritage doing their thing. And it goes without saying what's going on at 18th and Vine. We need to find a way to support our not-for-profits who are in the core of these cities and these neighborhoods with very little resources, making a difference in those areas that oftentimes are forgotten.
Well, it's all important, inspiring work, and I know that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. For people that want to learn more about Community Builders of Kansas City, you can go to their website at www.cb-kc.org. It's CB like Community Builders, cb-kc.org. Emmet, love the conversation. Love the conversation we had in advance of the podcast. This is basically the same version for everybody to watch and listen to. Thanks so much for everything you're doing. And, Andre Davis, my good friend, introduced us, and he and I had said a while back, we're going to do some stuff together. And we started to do that. I say the same thing with you too. I don't know what it is, but I hope that we can collaborate on some things, because you are the guy that I want to be able to work with because of the impact that you're making in this community.
Joel, thank you and your listeners for allowing me the opportunity of their time to talk about Community Builders of Kansas City. We didn't even talk about the project behind me, the offices Overlook, which we're happy about, but the Business Journal has highlighted it. But thank you for the platform to talk about what we do and how we do it. So I am extremely appreciative to you and your audience. And I'm looking for a better year for our KC Royals next year.
I am too. I'm looking for a better year for everyone, period, including the Royals. But Emmet, stay safe. Emmet Pierson Jr. is the CEO and president of Community Builders of Kansas City. Emmet, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
All right, great to visit with Emmet. Couple quick housekeeping notes before we wrap it up. I've mentioned it a bunch of times. One of the fundraisers for Big Brothers Big Sisters of Kansas City, their Most Wanted campaign. If you're interested in donating, you can just jump on text. Text JGOLD to 44321. JGOLD to 44321. And I also want to give a quick shout out to my sponsors, Kansas City Audio Visual, Kissa Construction, and Enterprise Bank and Trust. Businesses often come to Enterprise Bank because they require a consultative banking partner who knows that each business is unique and doesn't fit in a box. They need a partner that leverages a longer-term strategy in helping them to overcome short-term obstacles in achieving their goals. Love my partnership with Enterprise. You can reach me at joelgoldbergmedia.com. Thanks for listening to Rounding the Bases, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. Together, there's no stopping you. My name is Joel Goldberg. Catch you next time.